going under the skin of Invoking Havok entails to and alludes to a great many things within the creative psyche, but most importantly, investigating, lobotomizing any and all lyrical context and substance that there is on this record from a lyrical standpoint. And possibly, because this is your second full-length album, this is also the opportunity to tell any and all kind of like stories behind the scenes, any blooper-esque stories that you could possibly tell track by track about how these songs were constructed. Maybe the original purpose and lyrical meaning, the mechanic of some of the songs were inspired by more, at the time, silly things, or you look back to it, you're like, that was kind of fucking stupid, but it worked. Those type of things. We want to dig into your mind and find out all of the emotions that ended up feeding into this record. But most importantly, we get ourselves into an imaginary scenario. And this is usually what we do. We will have you pretend that you're no longer in a band. You're going into a library and you discover your album, Invoking Havok, but as a chaptered novel, possibly intermediate level reading, right? On the front, you have the album cover, but you don't have the logo for Jason Jeelzebub on it. You don't. Instead, it's just the album cover, but it's written by Jeelzebub, and that's the credit. You're like, who the fuck is Jeelzebub? So this is also from the perspective of your audience, from your consumers. So every book that you find in a library has that enticing, sometimes colorful book cover, the hard case. You see a Rick Riordan book, you see how colorful it is. You put your hand on the front and maybe the snake and the sword is embroidered. It feels 3D and it actually kind of like pops out of the hardcover. You turn it over though, because that's what you do with all books. And you see a chunk of text on the back. And this is supposed to entice you, almost meant to seduce you if you're that much of a bookworm, into reading the book in the first place. What do you think that intro text, that summary would say regarding this album, regarding this book?
Oh man. I think it would talk a lot about, it would start off, from the mind of I guess so and so. It would entail that the story starts with a lot of there's a lot of pressure at the beginning, but as you find that pressure subsides and it turns a bit more into chaos, and as things start to unfold, that story will then end with probably a more not so happy ending, a more traumatic ending. Yeah.
So perhaps speaking from the genre of most book reading, because that's how I think that's also the conversion we're looking to convey and confirm, is whether or not this was meant to be a fantasy book, maybe a tragedy, an epic. So from what I'm understanding, it starts out as an epic, but it would end up being a tragedy by the end of it. So perhaps, as per the musical aesthetic as well, maybe the substance invokes a fictional metaphor to provide some cover. That way, not all the characters, not all the people involved in the story are doxed to just put out in the forefront, because that's not what books do. But that's not what they're meant to do, unless if it's a biography, right? So instead, maybe this is a fictional autobiography.
Well, I was about to say there's would definitely be a lot of fiction tied within, but it is very based on. This would definitely be a real life event, kind of book. This is more of like somebody in the hospital documenting their last days, or somebody in jail, or somebody in prison on a death sentence documenting their last days, and writing about, everything that, it's kind of a, not like, you know, a goodbye letter. It's more of a, uh, it's showing everything that um, happened before the goodbye, and
I see.
probably what caused the
Okay. No, I like that. I like
or
that. So,
caused the trauma, or caused the issue, or that was the
okay,
stepping stone into the bigger picture, the bigger ocean, the bigger fish to fry.
gotcha. Okay. I like that. And I do apologize because it seems that even in episode 83, I underestimate how overwhelming of a premise the not only the book question air thing, the book metaphor, book in the library metaphor, or the book genre question can be. So, as per the response depicted in the session, I will definitely be providing a little bit more context, really, as we continue with this conversation. But reading this book, finding this book in the library, you having nothing to do, and I mean absolutely nothing to do with Jeelzebub, but instead as a reader, a listener, we foresee what is a perspective by perspective, end of the line, like any last words. These are those last words before a tragedy unfolds in someone's life. So, before we actually get into Under the Skin as well, the most important thing, like we were talking about earlier from a musical medium, if this is a book, right? Now we're curious about why the book cover looks the way it does. So I want to go ahead and have you tell me about the artist behind this album cover, the conversations that occurred in making this album cover, and why do you think it correlates with the album name Invoking Havok so well? Which, again, I'm going to be typing all this out now because this is I know this would be a little bit much for me too if I had no idea. So
Yeah. Well, we'll start with the artist, Martina. Martina, if you're watching this, I really hope I'm saying your last name right. And if I'm not, you can DM me and let me know I'm butchering it. But Martina Minor, from Italy, she, as I said, I think the live stream that she did art for a couple Italian deathcore bands, Human Deception and Defamed. And her art is extremely, it has a pastel like look to it, but at the same time it's extremely pop out. Like she really defines the things that you're supposed to be looking at, in the I mean, when I look at her works, I always think of the single cover for Defame's Crystal Prison, where it's a key underwater, and you got all the underwater, you got the stones, the leaves, but the one thing that's popping out the most, the one thing that you immediately see when you look at it, is the key. And that's one thing I've loved about her art, and she's just such a great person to talk to. And a lot of the things that I had told her, because I had already had a reference photo, I wanted a snake. I didn't know what with, but I wanted a snake. And, I told her, after eventually figuring out that a sword would be good, because, we need something for that snake to be doing. It can't just be a regular snake, just slithering on by. No. So I said, let's do a snake around a sword, and I kind of specified more of like I wanted kind of like a knightsman sword, you know, not like a katana. I wanted something that looked medieval, like Zelda, very very Lord of the Ringsy, and uh, when she and she had also asked if there was anything else I wanted in the background, and I wanted her. I don't know if it's easier to tell more than not, but with the grayness in the background of the album cover, I told her to give it a faint smoky feel, and man, I mean, we see the album cover. I'm not gonna lie, she came through really, really fucking really great with that. And the meaning, so like I said, I wanted the snake because the snake to me, it represents a couple things. It's got double meaning for me. So one, it represents sin, obviously, because that's what it's, you know, always mostly represent in religious history. And the other thing is people, you know, as unfortunate as it is to say people, because you know, everybody, you know, ends up meeting one or two or a few people in their life that end up, you know, as we would say, shed their skin, or you know, so it's kind of a reference to just the fact that, you know, everybody's got skin and everyone can shed it, and it's also a snake. I mean, a lot of people don't like that, and like it's very intimidating to most to
Yes.
the eye. And the sword, actually, how I came up with that too, you know, with the snake representing sin, and I guess uh, hardships, in hardships and kinships. The sword represents the violence and chaos that, you know, can come with it, and a lot of the destruction that it can cause to
Right.
People or people's lives. Yeah, and I guess with the logo too. Back when I drew that, I had said, you know, I was very inspired by, you know, that wave of black and deathcore that was out at the time, because it was 2021-ish, almost 22 when I drew that. And there's three main parts in the logo that I drew that still to this day, that's the reason why I've used it on the last two releases, is the spider webs, the moon, and the noose. And the spider webs represent my fear of spiders, dude. I have terrible fucking arachnophobia. If I see a spider, dude, I'm either finding something to kill it immediately, and I'm gonna be keeping 6 foot COVID distance from that motherfucker when I kill it.
Fair enough.
Or I'm gonna be like, this is your house, and I'm gonna not be in that room for like 3 to 4 hours after I fucking view it, dude. I don't know what it is. Spiders have always scared me, and the cobwebs, you know, are kind of a hey, get over that, because it really is, it's irrational, you know. And the moon, you know, night, you know, night over day. The moon, I think, is one of the coolest things in the world. And
Especially in our world.
yeah, no, for sure. And the noose, a lot of people, and I've had a person or two actually ask me, you know, because there's been a lot of logos to come out in the past 3-4 years with nooses on them. Mine is actually a lot more personal as to why it's there. I won't go into too much detail, but there's a reason for the noose, and I feel like it's also a way of, you know, overcoming that.
Yes.
And also, I've always thought of the gallows as being a very, very odd thing. You know, that was a point in time where dude, the moral compass of humanity was just
not there.
and which the another thing, which we'll actually get into that song when we talk about lyrics. When Greg said, I didn't even tell him to do this. He just sent me the lyrics, and when I read it, I was like, "That is so fucking perfect. I'm so glad you did that." I actually put it on a T-shirt, Jeelzebub threads, if y'all want it. Dude, "Emerge from the gallows" was the last line that Greg said, and Hell followed with. And I don't know if he did that on purpose from the logo, or if that was just something Greg had thought of, but I thought it was so perfect that he did that because it merged so well with the imagery and everything, you know, that I'm trying to write about.
Yeah, it's almost like with Invoking Havok, and Hell followed with ended up being like one of the most important songs on that record because it establishes a brand, and it also allows you to go full circle, especially during the creative process with Greg and with Chris featuring on this album in the first place. You're like, you know what? Even if I don't make anything from this, even if I don't profit from this at all, I did what I was here to do on this album.
Yep.
That's a beautiful thing. So, let's see. Now that we more or less discussed the context, the main symbols behind the album cover artist, now we dig into the substance. So, doing track-by-track lyrical analysis for Invoking Havok, we kickstart this beautiful session with track 1, Grave Gazer. What can you tell me about this track, my friend?
So Grave Gazer is part 1 to the last track on the album, Coffin Caller. Grave Gazer deals with the thought of morality, man, the thought of death and existence and life as a whole. And Grave Gazer, it talks a lot about, you know, why am I here? You know, and what am I supposed to fucking do while I'm here? And is anyone going to remember it? You know, it's very, yeah. You know, you're staring into the grave. You know, you're trying to figure out what you're going to do before you get there.
Yeah.
And it has a kind of a double partish meaning with Grave Gazer is being, you know, that depression is a big theme on this album. Depression is such a large issue in our world. I know a lot of people struggle with it. I struggle with it. And that's another part of this song, is it's detailing what somebody with possibly, you know, depression or major depressive disorder is going through mentally, and how they foresee life on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, that's what Grave Gazer is mainly about.
Okay. And feel free, of course, without surpassing your own boundaries or causing yourself any discomfort. Like, if there are deeper things that you want to talk about that maybe Jeelzebub fans won't immediately understand with these songs, this is absolutely, undeniably the time to tell those stories. So just to offer you that, like, hey, it's okay. And if you want me to edit anything out as well, I'll gladly do that.
Right.
Track 2, we have Isolation.
So this, and I'm going to be honest, looking at track list, this is probably one of, if not the most personal on the album, because it talks a lot about being introverted, dealing with things like, abandonment, betrayal, shit, even small things like being homeschooled, going long periods of time without, really being in society. Isolation talks a lot about the mental strain that it can put on you, because let's face it, anyone in the world can say how much they love to be alone, but you can only be alone to a certain point that it really does. It takes a lot on and off of you. And yeah, isolation's for my introverts, for all my people who, you like to keep to yourself, you let other people start the conversations. That's exactly what it's about. And of course, again, another double meaning with, things like abandonment and, just being pushed to the side, per se.
Yeah. And perhaps sometimes it feels better, or it feels better off that you end up being isolated because of prior negative affecting circumstances and the ramifications, this being the ramifications for the abandonment. I am very lucky to say that I've never really felt abandonment, but I did feel like there was an absence of emotional empathy with some of the people that I grew up with.
Definitely that too, for sure.
Yeah.
Not family per se, but definitely peers. And,
That happened way too often. And I mean, throughout the entirety of my life, I can say that, speaking for my own character, a little self-titled moment, I guess, here on the podcast, I've always tried to have the best intentions, but I've learned over the years that when you make it so blatantly obvious that you are either naively optimistic, willing to give people the benefit of the doubt right out the gate until they prove you wrong, which is just one of my philosophies. If you don't know somebody, don't pretend like you know them and assume that they're going to be bad. That's kind of like one of my things, but that's just coming from optimism. A lot of people decided along the way that they wanted to use my naive optimism and my ignorance in certain things to their advantage, and therefore certain paths were paved. And most of those people that wanted to use me in that form and wanted to be involved in indoctrinating me into all these very, very strange ways of life and these strange philosophies, well, eventually you got to be an individual and make the decision whether or not that is the path you want to take. But more or less, that's a very, very complex conversation for a different time. But it has me definitely thinking about abandonment. Like, sure, I never felt that, but it was almost as if some people wanted me to abandon my own philosophies and ideologies. That way I could accomplish their ambitions for them or alongside them, but without my own input, like, whatsoever. And I guess a certain part of me thinks that it does correlate only because some people, they won't abandon you completely, but they will try to convince you to abandon your own personality for their own personal gain, which I think is equally as bad.
For sure.
So that's track 2. Track 3, we have Death Weight.
I mean, this is something that everyone can relate to. It's basically just about feeling like there's so much fucking weight on your shoulders. I mean, it's too much to hold at once.
Right.
Like when you've got, this problem on top of this problem, and then you've got, these bills and this, fucked up expired thing you gotta get fixed, and then you got a bunch of other internal things, and then you've got external things like family or, death weight is just, it talks more so about the weight being so much that, it will get you to a point that you break down,
And that's fair, because that's kind of just modern society these days. It's like, really since the turn of this century, all the Y2K kids shout out in chat or whatever. But I don't know, it seems like we were kind of born and raised into a world, into a country, because me and you are from the United States, but it is kind of a global societal psychological epidemic now, where it's like it's kind of better to be distracted by these more temporary things and these countless temporary issues. And it's like, well, if everything was perfect, then you question whether or not life would be boring, or if there would be a utopia because of the labors involved to make life perfect. And it ends up being this like psychological gaslighting for you within yourself, because you're like, well, even if things were easier, would they be better? Would they be satisfactory? Or am I so indoctrinated and convinced in the life that I've been living recently that if things continue being as complicated as they are, then I have things to shoot for, then I have ambitions to fulfill? It's a very strange conversation to have within yourself, let alone have with other people. Like, if life was easier, would life be easier? Would it be better? Or would it be just kind of boring? And then maybe certain things happen intentionally that kind of bring us right back into the cycle of slaving away for temporary, irrelevant things. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You think about stuff like that, and you're like, I wonder. Or at least I wonder about that often. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, even if you have those theories rolling around in your noggin, well, life can be difficult and is difficult on the level that it is for almost everybody right now. And I don't think that's right. I don't think it's fair that everybody is being universally humbled the way that they are being right now.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you think you have life together? Fucking guess again. I'm like, bro, leave me alone. So I don't know, like, what's your stance on that? Like, obviously this is your song about more or less the unbearable weight that is upon our shoulders for such a long time. But
yeah. And it talks a lot more about personal weight, because mental weight, because a lot of things can happen up here, because this is the strongest organ in your fucking body,
right.
And just the things that you consume, the things that you tell yourself on a day-to-day basis, the way you think is, the way you are. You are what you think, you are what you eat, you are what you, and that's death weight, when you have so much, going on up there that it gets to that point where it's a death weight. Like, you either have already broken down from it, or and it does talk a lot about shit that's going on too in the world, but it's definitely way more focused on the mental side of just being burdened and having a lot to take head on. I also use the reference for what death weight means as the coin on the eye, because and sorry to get really dark here, but
no, you're good.
Sometimes that weight can be so much for somebody that it does becoming death weight,
right.
And it's unfortunate that people get so overwhelmed that they feel that's their only route, which it should never be anyone's route, you know?
Yeah.
But that's also talking about, you know, like I said, with the definition of death weight, playing on the definition with that.
Yeah. No, I like that. I really do. Because you're not wrong. It does make the album get super dark, but sometimes you need those darker depths that kind of sit with you at the bench. Just like, hey, this is valid. You're not evil. You're not scum for thinking this, but it's going to be okay. Like, let's see what we can do to help you move forward and get past this darkness. And this could be darkness sitting right alongside you too. This could be the Reaper. And he's like, dude, I've had a long day. I've had a lot of people do this already. So why don't we go ahead and take a 15-minute, right? Let's go ahead and see what I can do to help you not want to hang out with me for the rest of your existence.
Yeah. That's way to put it.
It's like, yeah, we never encourage, even in the darkest depths, in the boldiest corners of counterculture, I think it's safe to say that not many people encourage death upon oneself, but it's like embracing death and knowing that it is absolute and that your time will come when it's meant to come, but don't dwell upon invoking it yourself. You're not death, you're not Shinigami. Sure, you're capable of it, but act as if you aren't. Because once you distance yourself from that mindset, I think life is just meant to get so much better for you when you're not revolving your daily routine about, like, I could do this today and just stop everything. Because I definitely don't want to be too graphic with my words and
I was about to say, dude, the lyrics only get darker, so we may end up even graphicer. Who knows?
Yeah, that's fine. Well, I mean, that's the thing is, I think this could be the darkest album that we've ever done press for, but I'm all for it, right? Because this is new, this is fresh. So track 4, we have Hell Followed With, featuring Greg Gilbert, my homie from Shrine of Malice.
Hell yeah, I love it.
And of course, on the record of my new homie, Jason Jeelzebub, what do we got going on here with Hell Followed With?
So this track is basically, what are you doing? Over there being goofy. It's basically talks about the end of everything. What hell would truly be like, you know? Hell followed with, you know.
Hello.
That song is very like what's it like down there?
Yeah.
You know, and it has a lot of references to Dante's Inferno, and not only that, the Four Horsemen, and that's more of a fantasy track. You know, built. It's kind of Hell Followed With and Deep Inferno are taking breaks from the true aspect of the music and going into more of the showy, like really, you know, just dark, like really destructive, you know, eerie lyrics, you know.
Yeah.
Shit that makes grandma cry. I mean,
so more or less the next 2 tracks in this album are not only meant to tribute and pay homage to those who came before, those who inspired you, and their depictions, perhaps, of Dante's Inferno, captured then by Caesar, Aldrian, you know, Beelzebub, Alistair, not Alistair, Astaroth, Beelzebub, Astaroth, Satan, how they are all just these behemoths residing in the depths, in the catacombs of Sheol. Your dog is so funny. Definitely a big dog person. Maybe these next few tracks are supposed to help listeners cope with the darker depths of this album by bringing more like epic imagery. So maybe if I could compare this album to an age long ago, and you were mentioning the gallows and when that was an active thing, when that was a very, very important thing, and people just took entertainment in seeing people hang, seeing criminals hang, or even wives saw pride in seeing their affair-ridden husbands just hanging by the noose. Maybe this is the difference between their daily lives and the gallows, or maybe their daily lives and going to a theater play to see an Edgar Allan poem or Edgar Allan Poe poem or epic being portrayed by random people that you don't even fucking know. Like,
Right.
this is that more entertaining break in the album. But does then Hell Followed With, like, how much of Dante's Inferno and the lore, the fan fiction of hell that is Dante's Inferno, how much does this song and the Neurosis cover?
Yeah, so Neurosis, actually, that's where, and Neurosis and Apprehension are where the album goes back into, the
Right.
really dark. Hell Followed With, it's actually more the Deep Inferno, which talks about Dante's Inferno. Hell Followed With is kind of setting up like how Gravegazer is to Coffin Caller being part 1 and part 2. Hell Followed With is to Deep Inferno as part 1 and part 2.
Okay, gotcha.
A lot of just calls to, sin, and, the fact that there could be potential that, in specific sin, you could be in specific place for it. And just talking about how, like I said, like from a viewpoint, that's essentially what Hell Followed With and Deep Inferno is going to hell, looking at it, the sounds, the smell, you are in hell. Like, you're experiencing what religion and media and everything has portrayed it to be, fire and brimstone. And I guess in this case, with the 9 circles, kind of touching on what it would be like to be in each said circle and to see, how it would feel to be around, seeing those certain punishments, and because of those things that certain people have done. Yeah, it goes into all that, because I feel like, people are, and obviously it's probably better to be focused on heaven, but sometimes you got to look down. I mean, you can't, we'll even take it as crossing a bridge, dude. You got to look down. You have to. I mean, because if you don't look down, you're never going to either get over whatever it is you got, or, you're never going to have enough confidence to be able to look all the way down and look all the way up. Right. So yeah, and Neurosis. Is going, like I said, going back into that. That is probably the most mental health esque related song. Just the burdens that come with it, living with morbid and irrational thoughts, and things like, I mean, all over the spectrum, depression, anxiety, OCD, ADHD. I mean, even simple things like insomnia, neurosis is literally, mental health, mental strain, like, or a mental health problem. So yeah, and then apprehension.
I feel the pressure of this constant worry, thinking of things that just do not concern me. I let my head roll, and it spins out of control. I try to let go, but then the thought loop.
After neurosis goes a lot more into that mental health, with talking about my anxiety. It's very first person. Apprehension is extremely first person into having obsessive and looping thoughts, never being able to, sit back and relax, always worrying about something. Always, your mind's always on something. That's apprehension. You're always on edge. You're always fearful, Can't catch a break from your own goddamn self.
I know how that feels.
Exactly what apprehension is. And then, like I said, Deep Infernos. Just kind of going back off of the story of what hell is.
Cool. After that, I mean, we have Dante's Inferno. So is it simply like your first musical depiction of like how you interpret Dante's Inferno, and then of course you wanted Chris to do his guitar feature on the song?
Yeah. So. And that's one thing, again, that you don't see. You see guitar features, but not as much as vocal features. And I've only seen Chris on Null Existence. I haven't seen anything. So I was like, I gotta give him some shine room. And the one thing I loved about that song was I wrote the Deep Inferno in like under 48 hours, and that section that I had intended him to be on is the most Avengers, like, we're at the top of the fucking mountain sounding like melody, which is not something you hear in any of Shrine's music. And I think that was the best thing about it, and him being on there, was he added such a dissonant but happy dissonant sound to the song. And I wouldn't have chose anybody else to do that feature.
Track 8, we have Wreak Havoc.
Destroy, murder, slash and kill, impact, attack, do not stand still, ruin everything you see, including senseless.
Which I can only assume because of the misunderstanding by some fans as of recently. Like, oh yeah, your new album Wreak Havoc, right? You're like, nope, Invoking Havok, but close enough.
And I understand where that comes from, because Wreak Havoc was, it wasn't the first single to come out for the album, but it was the biggest to come out for it. So I do see, and Havoc, a lot of bands don't do that, where, they'll have an album title and it'll play off of something else that's on the album, but it's not the same. Like, it's very weird.
Right. So why did you end up deciding then to, like, because I can only assume that Wreak Havoc is meant to be the closest thing to what would be the title track for the album.
Yes.
So In that case, why the adjustment?
So, Wreak Havoc in itself, the song is very, so I guess the name, we'll start with the name. Now, Havoc, the word chaos is a word that, has always stuck with me because it's, it's always been a part of me, chaos. And Havoc is a stronger, more extreme term for chaos. So, Wreak Havoc is, the normal definition that's been being used since the 1800s in order to convey what, widespread destruction or just crazy, just brokenness looks like.
Yeah.
And then the Invoking, I didn't want to have a title track because, I feel like title tracks are too like, hey, look at me, I'm the poster child,
Yeah.
And I wouldn't even say there's a poster child on it. I mean, I think Neurosis would be the poster child if there was any, but there is none on this album. And the Invoking also comes from, I wrote a song back in like 2019 called Invoke the Succubus, and it was a fully clean guitar track. It was supposed to be inspired by a lot of the horror composition that's in the older Legend of Zelda games like Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. And that track, I was always so proud of that track, just for how it sounded and the name. So I wanted to pay homage to it by, using Invoke in some way, shape, or form. So I figured, you know what? Wreak Havoc, Invoking Havoc. It's kind of the same fucking thing, just, obviously different wording.
Right. The first thing that I thought of with this was like Wreak Havoc is kind of like the command song. It's like a command action programming. And Invoking Havoc is like, whoa, it's happening by the time that this album is done. Then Invoking Havoc throughout the entirety of this track list and nothing. Way past Wreak Havoc is more like, hey, by the way, and the rest of the album. It's kind of like the first thing.
Yeah, no, that's, pretty spot on. Yeah. Every time I move my arm.
I love that dog. What's your dog's name?
Daisy.
Daisy. Aw. She seems like a sweetheart.
Yeah, sometimes I wonder what would happen if somebody with a ski mask came in here. I don't know if she'd be friendly or protective.
If she'd be Daisy or Daisy.
Yeah. Because she's got not Pit, but Staffy in her. And Staffy's known to be super protective.
Yeah. Well, track 9, we got Black Sheep. With this.
Oh yeah, well also I forgot to mention with Wreak Havoc, the cool thing about that track is the lyrics weren't even personal per se. That was completely, I wanted to make something that I wanted to make the most like Cannibal Corpse graphic picture possible. Like, anybody who listens to it, like, that's something you can listen to when you're angry.
I see.
Hope, love, and faith, the big three. This was, I wanted Wreak Havoc to become complete opposite, fear, hate, and yeah. And then Black Sheep is, so Black Sheep's kind of like Isolation. Black Sheep is very personal, very based on it's what kind of what I think of myself. You know, just around society and the world. You know, black sheep. I feel like, I don't know. I'm something different, you know. I just feel like I stand away.
Okay. Track 10 to conclude this album. As you said, this is the part 2 to part 1 of Grave Gazer, not Grey Gazer. Grey Geezer. But Coffin Caller. What's the difference between this one and Grave Gazer?
So, Coffin Caller is what depression looks like in the greatest form. Like, this, if any track is going to go on to, you know, the day-to-day basis of just wanting to leave and cease to be, this is Coffin Caller. You know, it talks, I mean, it goes into the most graphic detail about, you know, that specific topic. Sheds light on, but it sheds light on how a lot of people feel. Coffin Caller is basically me trying to let everyone know, yeah, you know, you're going through this, you're not alone, you know, because a lot of people go through it, myself are going through it, you know. Yeah, Coffin Caller might be the darkest track on the album.
Okay.
Lyrically.
Include it then. Fair enough. Okay, and then, yeah, I mean, that is the end of the record. So question 4, kind of getting out of under the skin. Whoop.